Right, we're live. I'm just going to do a little tech checking on my end. I just want to make sure that things are working, which will take a minute because there's a little bit of latency. Is this working? Oh, look, there we are. My gosh, we're live. Okay, now I can do the tweet. Now I can post on LinkedIn. All right, and now I can come back here. And for folks who are watching, I can say what we're doing here. Oh, wait, hold on. Let's do this. Hello, my name's Philip Morgan. I am pleased to welcome whoever is here to this Indie Experts Talk. Our speaker today is Guillaume Wiatr. And before I turn things over to him, I want to give you a little bit of context about what we're doing. Guillaume is practicing the art of the presentation today. That's something I'm always advocating that indie consultants do more of. It's a forcing function. It forces clarity in thinking and effectiveness in expressing that thinking. It takes courage and humility to stand up in front of an audience, even one on a digital stage, and share the current state, your current best effort at making your thinking structured, clear, and compelling. So those of us in attendance should respond to Guillaume's act of courage today, not with silence, but animated input, probing questions, pointers to where we may have lost the thread, and reflections on our experience of his talk. So today we have a studio audience to do some of this. Kevin Murphy, Kyle Bowen, myself, and we have folks maybe who are attending and who can light up the chat with their thoughts. Please do. Guillaume, would you prefer that the studio audience hold questions until the end, or would you like us to just interrupt you during the talk or something else?
I think it's fine to just interrupt and share the questions. And I may suggest, I may answer the question right away, or suggest that we wait a little bit based on where we are in the presentation.
Sounds good.
But I would love to take as many questions as possible today. That's what would make this session valuable for me.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Those of you watching the live stream, please light up the chat with your thoughts anytime. That won't interrupt Guillaume. I'll feature relevant chat comments in the stream overlay as I see them roll in. Guillaume, I have purposely avoided doing anything like a real intro for you. I want to place even more pressure on you beyond just giving the talk, productive pressure, I hope, to explain who you are and what you're up to here. So, Guillaume, with that, you have the floor for as long as you need it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this introduction, Philip. Thank you so much for everyone who is carving out the time to attend today. Kevin and Kyle, thank you so much for joining the studio audience. We are going to take roughly an hour or so, and hopefully I talk on my own for less than an hour. that would be the goal. That would be the ideal. And what we're going to do today is practice the art of the presentation, and I'm going to test my pitch, meaning that I will talk about what is a strategic narrative, why you should build one, why is it important, when to do it, what are the conditions, and how to do it. So my name is Guillaume Wiatr. I started a company called MetaHelm 5 years ago with the idea that there is a need for companies to be more sustainable, more effective in a different manner these days. At first, I wasn't quite sure what this would look like, but over the years, I came to realize that most people that were working with me wanted to have a better story, about their business. And that was my starting point. This was not a new demand. Actually, I came across the need to create a better story over 21 years ago when I was a young consultant. I've been a management consultant for over 2 decades now. And I came across this need on accident. And fast forward today, I built a company, I built a service offering, and I am developing it with the assumption that the way to do it is through cultivating expertise. So that's for context. I want to start my pitch now and share my screen with you because I'm going to use slides. We are going to, I'm going this assuming that you here in the studio or in the audience may have heard about this need, may have heard about what a narrative is. You may have heard about me, and you come here with an open mind and you're wondering if this applies to you and how you might activate this proposition with the hope that we eventually work together. So these are the conditions for this specific talk today within the context of TI. And so we're going to cover this topic that I called building a strategic narrative. So you might be wondering, what exactly is a strategic narrative? My company specializes in this topic, and we do this for CEOs, executives, company founders, entrepreneurs, business leaders, even at a department level. Sometimes in large corporations, it doesn't matter so much what the type of organization or the size of the organizations you're in. What matters is that you're coming at this with the need to take your business to the next level. Maybe you want to unlock new levels of profit, you want to engage your team differently, or you're feeling that outside there are some factors pushing you to rethink the way you work. And there is one common denominator in everyone that I see coming at this topic with a fresh perspective is, I want to be able to inspire people differently. So the approach of strategic narrative is built on a simple and yet massive, subtle difference between two words that constantly get swapped in our conversation, that we use all the time interchangeably. And these two words are story and narrative. And it turns out right before we went live, I was chatting with Philippe and Kevin, and Kevin even did it without noticing, right? In his in the conversation. And there is a massive difference. And there it is. People will pay for a story, but people will die for a narrative. There is a reason why we have those two words. And if you think about it, you can define story as a piece of communication. And maybe in our society, it's a book, it's a movie. In business, it's a website, it's a brochure, it's a sales deck. Internally, it might be a piece of communication about your mission, your vision, and that's good. The limitation here is that it predominantly talks about who we are as a company. It's very self-centered. It's a very self-centered way to think about it. And it's really very, very closely tied to branding. So that's why in the branding field over the past few years, we hear a lot about storytelling. There are so many books about it. You can see most of those books in the background. But the problem that we have if we think about story in those terms is that we can struggle to connect with our community, with the people we're trying to help take action. And that's a problem, because a business should be about helping people make decisions. Hopefully, one of the decisions is to buy your product or service so that the business can continue to provide value. Narrative, on the other hand, can also be understood as a story. I mean, if you look in the dictionary, you'll see that interchangeable way of defining those two words happen. But there is another side of narrative that is the side that I'm exploring here with MetaHelm and that I'm working on. And it's narrative as a point of view, as a viewpoint. That's a more subtle definition. That's a more tricky one. But if you think about it, narrative is almost closer to discourse, rhetoric, ideology, thesis, perspective, or even an attitude. It's a way to interpret things. This definition offers an opportunity that is unique, which is that your story can also be defined as a set of behavior and the way you also make decisions. So when someone comes to me and says, I don't have a story, I don't have a narrative, I need one, I tend to say, you already have a narrative, but maybe you're not aware of it. It's not managed, it's not designed, and it's not doing the job that it should be doing to help you thrive and be successful. So basically, I understand the word narrative as a mode of operation. It shows in your communication, your collateral outside, externally. It shows in everything you say and you communicate, but it also shows in the way you think and the way you act in your business. So you might be wondering, so why do I need a narrative and when do I need a narrative? So I identified basically 3 types of moments. And I will use this green ball here to just go one by one. You're probably familiar with the concept of an S-curve, a sigmoidal curve. That's what it stands for. It's a model that's been very explored in depth. It's very popular, but it just models how the typical cycle of a business looks like. There is a beginning that maybe goes with a slow start, and then sometimes and somehow the business takes off and goes through a growth spur, and at the top of the curve will kind of slow down and maybe die off. And when this happens, it might be time to reinvent the business. I work with clients who are in those 3 phases of the S curve. Wherever they are, some of them will start, and they are small startups. Some of them are early stage. Some of them are growing really, really fast, and they face a different set of challenge than even than those 2 other layers and who do start. And some others fade, and they are wondering what should they do to continue to improve how the business work. So I just want to go quickly one by one, because these are going to help us map to very specific pieces that you might be interested in developing. So if you're launching, say you're in the start phase here, you're launching. You know that your offering is probably different. You're innovating, you're inventing something new, but the challenge is, how do you cut through the noise? Because perhaps you're on a crowded market. In that case, what you're going to need is a set of marketing material, sales collateral, where we're going to be able to hear and see the narrative, right? So these are going to be the pieces that you need to be able to start. These are just examples, but there are many other tools that you might need, such as perhaps an investor's deck, because as you're growing here, you're feeling like, hey, this business has a lot of potential, but I could really accelerate. I could grow my impact on my community if I got some funds, coming my way. And so you haven't quite nailed what your investor speech is going to sound like, but you know that it can't just be a series of 10 slides, or there's no magic trick here. It has to convey a bigger idea than just a series of cookie cutter messages. It has to show the opportunity that you want to pursue and why it's different, and why your product is the perfect illustration of this chance. Moving on to the growth phase. Now your business has some tenure, has some client. You've acquired, you've passed, based on the famous crossing the chasm concept. You went from early adopter to maybe innovators, early adopters, to maybe the first early majority. So you're starting to grow community, but what you need then is to hire more people. faster, and the right one, hopefully. So what you need is probably to redefine a mission, a vision, a purpose statement, and a clear employer's brand. You should be able to do that effectively and without losing focus if you have a strong narrative, and if the narrative has carried on from the start phase to the growth phase. The stakes can be pretty high here. One of my clients is actually in this phase right now, and we evaluated the stakes to be around $200 million for them, between hiring and the missed opportunities that they could run into. So not having a narrative is a costly mistake there. If you just play Russian roulette and just don't, you might be lucky, but a lot of companies are aware of that, and they're typically trying to find solution into different things that looks disconnected, and we're going to see that in a moment. But that's for the growth phase right here. Finally, in the third phase, when I call it the fading phase, because that's where the business is starting to maybe show some sign of slow down. So you manage to cut through the noise to grow, and now you're again in a crowded space, because guess what? You've got competition now. People have figured out that they can do the same thing as you. Your platform is not as unique as it used to be. So what you need is a new positioning. You need new ideas. You need to think about what's going to be the next innovation here. What's going to be the next version of your business? It could be that also you feel like you're living on borrowed time, that you're kind of lucky, but the clock is ticking because you see the business kind of diminishing, and you feel like, okay, you've got to do something. I've got clients in that phase as well, and the smarter ones will try to anticipate and read the signs around them and gather and say, okay, how do we reinvent our business? If you look at very successful companies, one that comes to mind is Netflix. Is a good example. Successful companies like Netflix constantly reinvent themselves. They go from one S curve to the other, and they continue to just create massive impact on our communities, on the market, on how we function as a society. So the way to go, the typical approach to do that is that there's a series of elements that you play with, and again, when people like you come to me and say, "Oh, I need a new story, I need a new narrative," they have one of these in mind. It always changes, and I ask, "What do you mean by that?" "Well, I need a new website. That's what I mean, and I need you to design my website." I'm like, okay, well, what else would you need? And through this conversation, we realized that they need a bunch of things. It might be different if you're a small business or big business, but I just picked 8 of them here to illustrate. They may have different names. They will do one of 2 things. They will either rethink the fundamental, typically the strategy behind this. But the problem is that it's going to be an exercise that is typically run by the CEO and maybe the leadership team. If you're a solo entrepreneur, if you're an indie consultant, which here in this context, it's you. And the struggle here is that once you've done that, it's really hard to translate that strategy into words that people can understand outside. That's the chasm that we run into. You know what you're trying to say, but it just takes so much time to express it, to explain it. In large organizations, there is research on this. And the research shows that only 10% of employees understand what the strategy is. So how do you expect people to make the right decision and be engaged when they don't even know where the ship is going? That's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is that typically you're going to try to just embellish and just make and clarify the existing story. If you go through one of these exercises, maybe you work with an agency that is going to ask you some thought-provoking question. If you're lucky, some agencies do this very well, but that's not what their number 1 value proposition is going to be. They're going to ultimately focus on the output of that exercise. They will do the thinking, the strategy piece, so that they can create the beautiful collateral, imagery, brand design, and so on, which is good. But it's an approach that, in my opinion, is too rare. And I experienced it as I was in charge of rebranding a company years ago, and we were lucky to work with one of the agencies within that mindset. The other ones had completely missed that subtle nuance here. The other thing that was going to happen is that those are going to be taken care of individually, unrelated to one another. And so what it does is that it creates dissonance, because maybe the marketing department now has a new story, but operational folks were not brought along to build that story. They're not on board. And there is a big effort to be done to connect those dots. So you end up with something that looks a little more like that. So it's tangled. There's many layers of strategies, and it creates a lack of focus. And you're still in the self-centered view of the company. So these are the three things that a strategic narrative fights against: a lack of focus, too many layers of strategy, and a self-centered view of the organization. Because again, remember the difference between story and narrative. Everybody has this mindset. Story, it's all about us. It's all about our product, what we stand for, and our vision. And then when we try to get to the outside and go to the market, it's like, hey, come and join us, work with us. People go, well, what's in it? What's about me? I don't get it. So I already talked about this. They're updated individually. I got a little bit ahead of my slide here. They're updated individually. Oh, and here's another thing too. A lot of the time, that work is going to be delegated to someone else. And I've seen interesting situations where the head of the company wants to, is happy to participate in early thinking and so on. But then they're really happy that somebody is going to take that off their plate, because they're so busy in the execution and the day-to-day, and they're going to take that and they're going to trust them to come back with a better story. I've seen people do that with agencies, with professionals, which is okay still, but there is a disconnect then. But I also have seen people do that. I mean, leaders do that with their marketing intern. So they're basically delegating, without realizing it, delegating strategy decision to somebody who's new, inexperienced, with the business. It's a really dangerous thing to do. So don't do that. Again, I want to tailor this talk to our audience today. If you are an independent consultant, you wear all those hats, right? Because it's just one head for all those functions. So it's slightly different. But your problem now is that it's harder to separate things. So you're in a different scenario. What a strategic narrative is going to do is gather those pieces of communications, gather all those definitional elements into one central chunk that provides focus, simplicity, and just better control. How does it do that? As I said before, it moves you from the mindset of story to the mindset of narrative. So let's dive a little bit here. A story recounts events and relates facts. A narrative promotes a particular point of view. A story happened in the past. A narrative will impact the future. A story is closed-ended. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. A narrative has a beginning, a middle, and we don't know the end, because our whole point here is to invite other people to tell us what the end should like. Customers, partners, outside influencers, our own team, and sometimes ourselves too, because as a business leaders, we are always the participant of our own narrative. There's a future, and we don't know what it's going to be tomorrow. Why does this matter so much? Why do I believe that this is a powerful way to operate? It's because when you do this, you prime your business to create a movement. All of a sudden, you create a community. You invite people to help you design the business with you almost. So the big shift in mindset here is that we don't assume that the business will exist forever. We don't assume that the business is here to just serve one person and maybe a set of shareholders. We assume that a business exists to improve the condition and the life of people. And if we can't meet that requirement, then we should go to the conclusion that the business shouldn't even exist in the current form, and that it has to be reinvented. Why does this matter now? Well, look around. A crisis just changed the game for all of us. And it's in the air. There's so much data, so much information to prove this that I didn't put on my slides, but those 3 key insights illustrate why it is important that you think about building your business with a strategic narrative now. People want to be inspired by purpose. Purpose is the new way to think about business. So Simon Sinek popularized this concept that was not new, but he put out a book in 2009 or 2010, I think. He had a talk before that really makes a strong stand behind, for this. He didn't necessarily give us really highly practical ways to do that, but he built a really good case. And I think that 10 years later, what we're seeing is that most people get why we need purpose. And now it's not if we need purpose, it's how do we activate purpose. That's what a strategic narrative helps you do. It creates a movement, and ultimately is so focused on the people who will be users of your business that it makes them better humans. How do we do this? It's great, Guillaume. Thank you. Wonderful ideas, but let's get practical. I built a model on the assumption that I just made. I wanted to build a model that is integral, that brings all those pieces together. And after a lot of research, a lot of years of thinking, I came to realize that those 2 axes were probably the best way to look at this. There's an internal side of your business and an external side of your business, an individual side of your business. And that's true whether you're solo or have a team, because the way the narrative resonates inside you can be slightly different the way it resonates inside each of the people in your team. So individual and collective. A strategic narrative, the way I define it, is a system of stories. So the stories are here to take you to the space of narrative. And there are 4 major stories that you should be working on. And here they are. The first one, I always start with this one, is the origin story. What I mean by the origin story is that it's the story that is going to help you identify the reason, the initial, the deep emotional, visceral reason why this business exists. One of the functions of the story is to help you identify the opportunity that you see and that others probably ignore. It stems, typically I see it stem from a moment of pain or a frustration. I'm going to use the case of Netflix that I used earlier. The Netflix was founded on a moment when the founder and the CEO went to the video store and had to pay fines because he didn't return the movie on time. And he said, that sucks. I disagree. We shouldn't have to pay for that. We shouldn't roll on the video store schedule. It should be all about us, people who want to enjoy a good movie. And so he started Netflix with the service that it still exists, but it's been replaced by streaming. But the initial service was you go online, you pick your movies, and we send you DVDs, and you just watch them at your own pace and return them whenever you want. So and for you guys here in the audience, this is what I want you to do: is think about why you started this business. What was the moment when you decided, that's it, I've had enough? Or, super interesting idea. Nobody saw that. I'm really fascinated by this. I'm getting obsessed by this. This is really the engine of the whole inspirational narrative system here. It's the one on the bottom left of the quadrant, is the origin story. Moving on to the opportunity story. The opportunity story is how do you inspire your community to reach for a more positive impact? It's the destination where you take us all as a leader. It's what better place are you promising to get us to with this business? Whereas it's better health, better convenience, less risk, you name it. But most of the time, it's probably somewhere in your head, but it's not expressed very well. And if you have a team, like I said earlier, it might be a different idea for just everyone. So there's misalignment there. The perspective story is, how do you get us there? Like, okay, so that's great. We're excited. Now, what are the tenets of our company here? What's the mission? What's the vision? What are values? What are what else going to be our fundamental ways to work together? And if you don't have that in place at the internal but collective way here, what's going to happen is that there's going to be things happening all over the place. In the growth phase, the business is going to struggle. And finally, the product story is, how do you design, how do you position new products that align with that overall approach? What I see all the time is this scenario. The product story is really the number one we think about. If you go on most websites, you'll see who we are, what we do, the product, the benefit, and we skip the fact that people don't necessarily have the same context as we have. So it's going to slow down. It's going to slow down sales. It's going to create hesitations. It's going to sometimes, for bigger organizations, I work with a large organization who has many lines of products. Well, the products they look good, but they don't match with each other. They don't align to the same opportunity necessarily. And ultimately, when it comes to make tough decisions, to drive the company and to go through these inflection points of the S curve, is getting really hard, because we don't have a common North Star here. We don't know which way to go, because we lost sense of where is this company headed. Okay, so I want to do a pause. I want to make a pause here, because I recognize I'm throwing new ideas, a lot of details at you. So just want to check if you have questions, and I'll look at the chat too. All right. So Simon is asking, I had struggled to figure out what specific problem you solve. Maybe you start with your Spidey slide, 164 and 66, and show the problem, and then explain what you do to fix it. Okay, that's good feedback. That's helpful. I probably spent a few minutes before I got there, so that's great. Thank you, Simon. And I'm guessing that the Spidey slide probably was the moment where you realized, oh, okay, that resonates. I mean, I don't want to make too many assumptions, but that makes sense to me. Cool.
Can I jump in and ask a question?
Yeah, Kai, go ahead.
Yeah, like so going back to your well, the same framework here, but what's the difference? Yeah, thank you. Perspective story versus product story. I just made a note here, and it says, okay, so for a perspective story, just putting it in my own words, it's like how we get there to the opportunity, right? Or the goals. But then I get a little confused in terms of like, how is it different than the product story? Like so how to position the new product, if the product is how to get there? I don't know. I'm having trouble differentiating.
Sure. Thank you for asking. I think there is another layer of technical details I'm happy to share with you. And that's this interaction here. The stories look like they are in each of their quadrant, but they have a lot of interactions between each other. I had to simplify it for the purpose of the speech. The perspective story is really how it's your product, specific to the product. It's the way you think about product. So let's talk about Apple. Apple's perspective is very, very clear, very known about how design should be, considered. It's all about the elegance, the user. And so it stems from this in this product development axis here. And then as you move to the product story, the product is the materialization of that thinking and that perspective. The product is here to serve how we think about the way we want to solve a specific problem, not the way around. Not the way around. Because if you do this, you lose sense, you lose meaning, you lose purpose, you lose a lot of things, especially if you grow as a large organization.
So that's interesting. Yeah, to like ground it in an example like that. Like so correct me if I'm wrong, but like so the perspective story then up there for like Apple, for example, would be something to do with like a point of view around the value of design, maybe. And then the
Yeah.
product story is like, we have products that are expressions of that. Is that?
Yeah. That's
Okay.
that's one element, but there is even a stronger one, which is Apple has always fought for individual expression. If you remember their 1984 ad commercial, it was all about one individual, and all the examples they took around this campaign was one individual, and you should be able to be creative and express your view of the world and make an impact. And to this day, it's still the way they think about the way they design their product. Then it moved to many other products, and now we're on iPads, watches, and then I just read about a car. It still stems to the same perspective. For you, Kyle, and for us here, independent consultants, we build product based on a point of view. We don't build a product and then move to a point of view, right? Otherwise, we end up with 10 point of views that are completely different, and we lose ourselves, we lose people. It's totally inefficient. It just doesn't work this way. So it's the same for, I see this pattern all the time. It's always like, and here what I mean in the product story is sometimes it's really small decisions. So let me give you another example. I'm working right now with a client who builds networks that are safe for large retail organizations, and they're going to market with a completely different perspective on as everybody else. They physically separate the network. They use cellular network to avoid large hacks, such as the one that we heard about Colonial Pipeline and the food processing company. They have strongly ingrained in their DNA at an internal and collective level, this is the way we think about security. And they're building a set of products based on that. And a couple of weeks ago, somebody had a new product idea, and it was awesome, but we ran it against the perspective story and say, how does this match our perspective story there? And it was okay, but there were some misalignments that could have costed this company a lot of efficiency, a lot of value, a lot of money. There is another interaction. I just want to flash it at you, but I'd like to then finish the pitch here. It's the other one. It's the other diagonal here. You could probably see it on the left on my slides, but it's the connection between your origin story and your opportunity story. Naturally, when I hear company founders tell me how they started a company, they all talk to me about a moment, an event, a situation, a group of people that made them think about we need to invent something, we need to do this differently. And why do we need to do this? Is because it's going to help a lot of people. It's going to help. There is a market for this. You hear this all the time. And the opportunity story sometimes drifts and goes somewhere unknown because we completely forgot why we were doing this in the first place. I'm not saying that you have to tell yourself and tell your clients how you started your company every 5 minutes and every day. That's not the point. What I'm saying is you need to do the work of exploring the deep meaning of why you started this company. Once you have that, things get a lot clearer and a lot more efficient.
That
I want to
clarified a lot for me, Guillaume. Thanks for
Yeah.
doing that. Sorry to cut you off, Kyle.
Oh, those diagonals. Do you think I should show them too, or is it too technical to until I have a question, Kevin?
I think people may have more traction with this depending on the phase they're in, and
Yeah.
they may more quickly grab on that. But I do feel
Okay.
like it would be something you should be primed to introduce if you see them, or maybe check with them. Is this translating for you? And if not, this little
Okay.
impromptu breakdown is very helpful.
Okay, awesome. I want to give you a concrete example. I mapped out the strategic narrative of Volvo on my model. It's gonna add another, and I'm building a library of. I'm hoping to get to about 20 examples in the next few weeks. I've got 5 to 7 built, so for what they stand for. And fast forward, I just want to walk you through those 4 stories very quickly. The positioning of Volvo on safety, we know them for strong, sturdy, safe cars. It all started because here in the origin story on the bottom left quadrant of the model, the president lost a relative in a car crash. It was a personal tragedy, and Volvo's president lost somebody and said, it's because the person didn't have a seatbelt. And so he thought it was a painful moment, it was a tragedy, and realized, okay, there are millions of people. Literally, I think the numbers were in the millions of. No, don't quote me on this, but too many people lose their life in that situation. We've got to do something about it. He started looking around and forming the opportunity here on the left corner, talking to people. He noticed that a lot of the other car manufacturers were not interested in this opportunity. They thought of it as something that would actually slow down their growth, limit their market, and they were really scared about changing the narrative in people's mind. But these CEOs started to shape a new narrative and see a chance to change that. So what he did is that he hired an engineer that was working at Saab on aircraft safety systems, and asked him to come in and say, can you do the same for cars? And the guy came up with a solution, very simple, very effective solution that we all know, and that hopefully you all use every day, which is the 3-point seatbelt. When they introduced that features in all their cars, so now moving on to the perspective, and they crunched the number, they did some tests, and they realized that the chances of survival under 60 miles per hour in a crash jumped to almost 100% if you wear a seatbelt. So from that moment, they decided, we're going to be fanatic about safety. This is going to be our positioning. Everything we will do in our car will evolve around this. And to this day, they invented all the systems that you see on Volvo's, side impact protections. You name it. I don't have the list from the top of my head. That drove their product story here on the bottom right corner. And the first thing they said is use the 3-point seatbelt. It's simple, it's efficient, and it's available to everyone. And they I think they did the math and they closed. Okay, that's the number. They saved, since the 60s, they saved about 2 million lives. They have a lot of information on this. But still, some places on Earth, some governments, they resist this idea. At first, when they launched it, the New York Times itself pushed back and say this is a limitation of our freedom and of our liberties. It's actually really dangerous because if you get in a car crash and you can't get easily out of the car, you may die in a fire because cars would catch on fire very easily at the time. So that's what it looks like. In the origin, it was a crash. This guy, he's someone who survived a car accident, is actually an actual survivor. This is a set of photos that were taken, to illustrate that you may be a little, damaged, but you're still alive. This is the perspective showing in the Volvo advertisement, and this is the simple solution, the simple, elegant solution that we all know. This is what it looks like when you bring the visuals and and the text together. And for those who are still convinced that not only they need a narrative, but they also need a better story and a better slide deck and a better investors deck, notice how these look like slides. These are the narrative slides that you need in your collateral material. This is what I mean by narrative. You can talk about the product all you want. If you don't say, at a minimum, why this matters in terms of the origin, the opportunity, and your perspective, and why you do things the way you do things, your chances of survival, your chances of of success are limited. I do this with companies that are small and big, as I said earlier. Here's an example. It's one of my clients called Metric Story. It's a startup based out of Seattle, and they work with Google Analytics to find and to help retailers find out why people stop shopping within within their customers' experience. They were having trouble raising money, and after we worked together, they raised $2 million. The engagements were in the range of a few $1,000s, working with them through a series of workshops, redesigning their investors deck. There are other factors that led them to that success. I'm not going to take credit for that. Just saying my method led them to that. But the CEO, about a year after, told me, with hindsight, I see that at the time, I could not articulate why we make a difference. I could not give a compelling vision to the investors that we're trying to convince. We were too down and in the weeds. So this is an example of the oops, sorry, I went too fast. Of the start phase. Metric Story was here. They're in the start phase and they're trying to cut through the noise. I want to give you an example of the grow phase. This is at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I work with the team who fights malaria with Bill Gates. And this particular team is focused on what they call geospatial epidemiology. So they track where the virus goes on the field. And it's a very difficult virus to track because it's carried by insects. And you have to be extremely quick at intervening and catching the virus before it spreads. So you have to have an information system that helps you track that. And they had all those big ideas, but there are a team of grantees, of people coming from different organizations. And they were feeling like, despite the massive amount of money that they had to carry this project, it's a very important project for the Gates Foundation. Despite that, they were misaligned on the mission. They had grown, the program was doing really well, but they were starting to feel like they're starting to go different directions. So we rebuilt that narrative together. Those photos were taken before COVID, so it was in person. I do the same work also online now, and we did it with pretty creative techniques, as you could tell here. I brought toys to have people work on with 3D elements, which means again that a narrative is not just a story you write. It's how people behave in the room, how they interact, how they think, how they make choices, and also a story, but not only. The third one is L'Oreal. So L'Oreal USA is one of my clients. This is I work with some of their brands, and L'Oreal has a strategy, a growth strategy, which consists of acquiring already successful startups in the beauty industry and taking them to the next level. That's how they constantly go at the top of the S curve. That's how they reinvent themselves. Not just internally. They've got all the infrastructure, the growth. They've got they can produce any beauty product they want, be anywhere they want in a matter of weeks. But the fresh new ideas, that's sometimes they acquire it through acquisition. And what this means is that we have to orchestrate a large ship, a very big diversity of people with different mindsets. We have to focus them not on 50 different strategies, but on one idea, one big strategy. And recently, one of the brands I work with called It Cosmetics is a great example of that idea. Look them up. They're this fantastic line of product and these products really are easy to apply. They bring confidence to people who use them. So I've been working with them for several years now, because working on a strategic narrative is not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing work. How can you start? Assuming you're interested in this topic, you may want to sign up for my daily publication. I write 7 days a week about this. I share tools, models, examples, new ideas, success stories, many different things, thought-provoking little tidbits sometimes. And I invite you to join, because as I hopefully prove today, it's a journey. It's not a one-time thing. And maybe some ideas need to percolate and grow so that when you need them, when you're in the growth phase, you go back to these principles, you go back to the essentials of a strategic narrative. I have a workshop coming up, and I would love for you to register now. It's July 27th. It is a workshop that will transform the way you think, you talk, and others think and talk about your business, so that your business can thrive. You're going to, in this workshop, what are you going to do? You're going to complete the framework. This would be once you do all the stages that I will teach you, and the ultimate results. So that's the most crystal simple version of it. But there are many different stages, over the course of this workshop. But that's the product right there. You're going to build that North Star that is going to help you redefine the way you position, you think and talk about your business. Is this a positioning workshop? It has to do a little bit with positioning, but it's not a positioning workshop. Is this a point of view workshop? It has to do a little bit, but it's not a point of view workshop. It's a more holistic, integrative workshop that talks also about you as a leader and how do you carry the business forward. So I hope you feel excited about this opportunity, because it's coming up soon. It's going to last over the following 6 weeks. All the content, the videos are going to be published before the event, and we're going to meet every Tuesday at 8:30 Pacific for 90 minutes. This workshop is limited to 12 people. I already have a couple signups and another handful of people interested. And I want to limit it to a small number of people so that we have enough time to give each other feedback and make progress. All right, I'll stop there. I'll see if there are any other questions, but I'm looking at the clock too, so I think we're about an hour. I feel like I talked a lot more than I had thought about. I talked way too much. But
a quick production note: how much time do we have with you, Guillaume, for feedback, discussion, Q&A?
I scheduled a lot of time after, just in case. So
okay, great.
We could do.
So
it's not a problem.
Thank you. Okay, Guillaume, thank you. That was awesome. Folks here in the studio audience, let him have it. Folks in the chat, what questions, feedback, etc. do you have? Now it's sort of open season on Guillaume, so to speak. Freeform conversation, discussion. How could this pitch become better? What would make it better?
I really enjoyed the second half of it in terms of synthesizing the idea. I don't know if that's the right word, but it crystallized the ideas for me in terms of the connection between companies I knew about, like Volvo, for example. I didn't know as much detail about the origin story, so that's interesting information to find out. But seeing that that connection where you get on that last slide where you see how they end up with basically the narrative slides that they need about their business. That's very compelling, very impactful. And so I just commend you for that, the way you put that together. I was trying really hard to track the ideas, but once I saw that, it really clicked for me.
Okay.
And so that's excellently done.
So would you recommend I guess what would practically, what would you recommend that I change in the order or the
I think the
balance?
Apple example is less precise.
Okay.
And so I would if you keep building more of these examples, I think it's excellent based on your audience, right? Maybe you could predict like this audience is going to resonate more with an Apple type brand than a Volvo brand. But to me, that one was just so crystal clear what the connections were. I didn't have to wonder if I was getting. I was very confident. I was like, no, I see the direct correlation of that origin to like now I have a perspective. Or I mean, now I found an opportunity because other people don't think the same way. And then now that viewpoint is influencing exactly what is in our product, And so that made a lot of sense at that point. And so I don't think you did a bad job of anything before that, but it's just keep that in there, I would say, for sure.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, I do think that when I think like just on I don't know if a emotional or like an engagement level or something, like there were a few moments for me. It was like, oh, when you showed that slide, what's the difference between story and narrative? And that was a really clarifying slide for me. I wonder if that might come sooner. Because that's almost like here's where we're gonna get to, because there's some things on that slide that are listed that are like, ooh, I would like to move there from A to B. Like there's like a hook there maybe. And also definitely the Volvo, the Volvo example was super clarifying. So I don't know. I mean, I wonder if the pieces might be shuffled in different ways. But yeah, because it took a little while to get to that point where it's like, oh yeah, like these are the things that I definitely value, like, having a viewpoint, like what the impacting the future, like that's so clarifying. Audience to participants. That was so I wonder if like that's like a destination slide in a way.
I've gotten that feedback. That's one of the most effective slides for that pitch. I've gotten that feedback before, so I definitely want to continue to work on it. That's helpful. I just this morning I built this one because I thought, okay, I'm just gonna make this visual even more clear. This idea even more clear.
Just a suggestion. It might be possible. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No,
please.
Please.
Still finish that. As I say, it might be possible at the beginning to tease some of these more clarifying ideas. So, like for example, more quickly going through the slide that ends up being the spaghetti of what story only gets you.
Yeah, which is what Simon was. That's one.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe quickly going through those rather than spending time on each of them, but just, for example, if you only have story, you have these pieces and you end up with this, and this is actually what we're talking about is, narrative giving you these things, and then you can build on that very quickly.
So actually, it's interesting. I agree, Kevin, because I was even feeling it myself and looking at the clock. And when Simon's feedback came, I think he made a great point, and I wasn't surprised, because what happened is that I typically use I typically use this slide. That's the one. If I have 30 seconds, I will just use that slide to show the difference. But these were, I almost like build that progression for the purpose of that pitch today, this morning, thinking, oh, I have a little more time, so maybe I'm gonna. I think there is value in explaining where this comes from. But I might have gone too far in the dilution of that concept. That's what I'm hearing from you guys' feedback. So I could reduce it maybe to just that. Yeah,
I have a similar thing to add. It's like one of the things I'm trying to do as I'm listening to these practice pitches is just notice the tension that is created at certain moments, and then when is it resolved? And like one of the things I hear folks, Kevin and Kyle getting at is sometimes maybe the tension lasts too long, and but and then maybe there's times when it should be resolved immediately. And I think thinking about that's really valuable.
Mm-hmm.
One of the very early slides, people will pay for a story, they'll die for a narrative, creates this incredible tension that I feel like started to get resolved or addressed again in slide 170. So if you notice like how long that tension was, maybe I'm just, I don't know, an overly critical or overly sensitive audience member, but the tension is hanging in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying it's unbearably long, but that's like once you've got the basic bones of the presentation in place, I think you start to have to think about, okay, how do I kind of maintain that tension before the chord resolves at the end of this passage? Is it the whole presentation? That might be okay. But I just wanted to echo that in using those words, because I'm hearing other folks say that as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I made a note here about that slide. I wrote down, you say people will die for a narrative, but how many people have you killed? I was going to open with that joke, but thankfully I didn't. So anyway, no, but the other thing I was going to say seriously is in that one slide, like the S curve slide, I wonder too if there's a way to condense that a little bit so that obviously like who you're talking to, right? You have a broad audience now, but if this was like a client, maybe a prospective client, it would be like, I mean, if they're in the fade, you can't do fade, right? You're not fading away, but like a mature business or something, so that's probably something you would do anyway. Like,
actually,
if you weren't
actually, I like the word mature better, Kyle. So I'm just going to change it right now. Fade is probably a more negative connotation. The thing is that when I talk to a client, I know where they are already.
Right.
But here it's just, I mean, it could be many people watching or you guys, and I wanted to go really broad. So if I had to use this with a client, I'd say I still mention that because a lot of people don't realize that you don't need a narrative just here because you're starting. You need it all the way and on and on and on. So I could just say, okay, great. Well, let's start by acknowledging this. You're here. You're at the start, right? Okay, and this is what it means. Okay, let's move on. So I would use this device differently. But I agree with you, Kyle. I could shorten this a lot.
Guillaume, can you jump to slide 166?
Yes, I saw the comment that Simon posted. Thank you, Simon. I don't know who you are, but you make good comments. There you are. Yes. Well, if I have 30 seconds, that's the thing I bring up. Because that's it.
And that very nicely sets you up to lead into this other core idea. Mm-hmm. You're moving from chaos to structure. How do you do that? You need a system. Mm-hmm. This strategic narrative is a system for organizing these critical stories. Mm-hmm. So there is really, a like 5-minute version of this somewhere that you can extract out by pulling out these really vivid slides if you ever need to fit into a much more compressed time frame. Mm-hmm.
I love how you just said it, Philippe, and I think you're using a lot of the words that I already use in the pitch, but I think the combination, the way you just said it, is helpful, especially moving from chaos to, did you say focus or order? I can't remember. I think that's it feels like a compelling message because it's pretty much what we.
Did Guillaume just drop off? Okay, that's it, folks. I feel like the oh, he's back. You're
Uh-oh.
back. Hey.
You
I
lost
don't
me.
know what
When did you
happened
lose
there.
me? Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, it was just this moment of like you were about to say something and then you
Oops.
disappeared. You're back though.
Okay.
That's what
Where
matters.
where did you lose me? When did you, what, I don't know.
Oh,
Where?
well, you were showing the spaghetti slide, and I
Oh,
really
yeah.
apologize. I'd gotten distracted with another thought, which I'll share in a moment. Anyway, please go ahead.
So I don't know where I left off, where you couldn't hear me, but I was saying, in essence, on this slide, I was saying I really like the words you used, and I was saying that it goes from chaos to order or focus is a compelling message, because I feel like most of us who are business owners, leaders, CEOs, or entrepreneurs, that's what we're trying to do, is get organized to solve something. So, and we don't pay, if we don't pay attention, things get really messy, which is, I mean, nature and organic stuff, it's great, but for some purposes, for some specific goals, you have to have a system.
One thing
I
I'm
think
seeing
that-
in this, and oh, sorry, go ahead, Phil.
Oh, just real quick, I'll add one more thing, and then I want to hear what you had to say, Kevin. Like the spaghetti, kind of chaotic, is great. If you're ever presenting this to some organization that does anything with like life science or chemistry or that sort of thing, I think there's this opportunity to have one of these be these atoms that are bouncing around, and then on the right, it's a molecule. You would just kind of
Right.
change how you draw it, but
Right.
I think that would sort of speak, maybe, or maybe you would accidentally, draw the wrong kind of molecule. Anyway, just an idea about
Yeah, that's
a different
good. Visual
Kevin.
metaphor. Yeah, that's great.
If you were ever like speaking to a group of chefs, you could use spaghetti and then have the spaghetti be boxed. Like, I'm so sorry. No, don't listen to me.
One idea that's coming out in my mind, Guillaume, as a reaction to hearing this, that I'd love for you to either tell me is, on the right track or not, is it seems like, and maybe this idea just appeals to me because I tend to have a lot of buckets of things that I'm interested in pursuing in my consulting, and I don't always, it feels a lot like the left side of the slide, but it seems like talking about that, the client you said where they had this idea, it was a really good idea. They do this separate, wireless communication for these transactions that's more secure, and they had a product idea, and they checked it against their actual perspective on these things, and they found that, well, the alignment's not there as much as we want it to be there in terms of stuff that we put out. And so there's this like keeping yourself accountable with your original purposes or with your original intentions, like with what you set out to do. Are you still like actually following through on that? For me, that's a very appealing side of this, that over time I would, kind of flail less for having built this control framework or having built this, validating kind of thing I can run my own ideas up against. So.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Keep yourself accountable with the original intent or purpose.
That's interesting though, because like I think of the Volvo example again. Like so imagine a scenario where, I don't know, somebody internally is saying like, well, what about like comfort, right? Like they're known for, another thing they're known for is like real luxury sort of like comfort, right? There's all kinds of stuff about, like the
Heated
kind
seats.
of materials they use and things like this. If they were to do that though, like would they cross check against that and be like, no, we're the safety company? I mean, I'm using a clumsy example here, but it's like, what are those constraints not, are they not useful or something, or are they harmful? Is there a scenario where they're harmful? I don't know.
There's maybe a scenario where they're harmful. I think what we have to keep in mind is that ultimately a narrative is what's in people's body, literally, in their mind, in their decision, their gesture, how they, how we react to things. So we're trying here to model and capture and make things that is very intangible visible. and it's something that evolves very quickly. An organization, a company is designed by brains, and we're going to try to control this. But in the outside, it's not something you can control just alone, because it interacts with bigger narrative than just the organization. So being an independent consultant is a great example. It's a good narrative now. Why? Because society allows it, technology enables it, because many other outside factors. So I haven't even talked about that yet. But in the case of Tesla, here I'm going to give you the Tesla example. Another car manufacturer, the reason why their narrative got so powerful and the success is because they launched at prime time. They even got subsidies and money from the government to fund energy efficient vehicles. So I think there is that other element. So Kyle, I'm just looking at this from trying to illustrate what this might be at a certain point in time back in the 60s when they launched, and for sure the brand just branched out to many different things. It's not just safety. I think you're right. It's comfort. It could be different things. So I'm not sure if I have a black and white answer to your question, but it's that's the way I see it.
Yeah, I guess what I'm thinking is like I'm trying to raise some imaginary objection where it's like, well, this is too constrained or something. Like this is going to limit our creativity or our ability to reinvent ourselves.
It is going to. Right, I love this question. It is going to limit It is going to increase the constraint that you put on your creative process, and that's going to make you more creative. Because a lot of people think that creative is just do whatever, whenever. This is not how it happens. Creativity comes from constraints. So yes, this is designed for that. It's going to give you guidelines. It's going to give you something to shoot for, and a set of criteria to evaluate against. And as Kevin said earlier, something to look at down the road when you turn back and you're like, okay, we said we would do this when we started 10 years ago. We're about to decide if we want to we launch this new product. How does this tie to how we started? And so I think it has value over time.
About being like intentional is what I think I hear you saying. Yeah.
It's about being more strategic. Intentional, you can call it smart, intentional, aware. There's lots of words, but it's what strategy should be is planning. It's planning, and it just strikes me that there is a narrative around strategy, which is strategies are small businesses don't need strategy. We just do it, right? It's too expensive, or there's not a process for that. And then the other part of this narrative is for large organizations, the strategy, the strategy is done by the strategist and the governance of the company and the CEO, and you guys do what we tell you to do. And that's no longer true. This is an outdated model. More and more companies struggle because of that. People want to be part of it. They don't claim to have the final say, or the smartest idea, but they want to be participative. And we're seeing a whole movement of new companies organized around this idea of self-organization, distributed governance, that are really, really doing well and that are challenging the status quo. So this way to look at strategy is connected with that idea. Intentional.
Does anyone ever ask you?
What's that?
Oh, Philip, are you muted?
Yes, I am. I just wanted to jump in. That there's that thread in this presentation about this new type of company, participatory co-creation of the business. Maybe that's pushing a little bit too far. And then this other thread about if you bundle strategic work with like the execution of creative work, like logo design or, website design, that kind of thing, then the leadership of the company will over focus on the execution work, and they'll end up delegating away some of the strategic work. That was a really fascinating point. I don't know if there's room in this presentation to elaborate on that, but I just wanted to call out how fascinating that is. And
Yeah.
again, you're going to have constraints here. You can't put every great idea into this presentation, but I just wanted to highlight that was a really fascinating idea. And
Okay.
Kyle, I interrupted. I apologize.
No, speaking of things you shouldn't include in the in the presentation, I was just gonna say, like, I wonder if does anybody ever ask you, Guillaume, like what's your strategic narrative? Like, now I'm curious to see like what's MetaHelp's like, what's their the 4 grid there? I don't know.
So it's I don't have it here in this slide, but I can tell it to I can tell. Okay, let's do this. I'm gonna build it for you live. You ready? This is not rehearse, but so my origin story is this. It was 2001, and I was brought in by a company called Total in France to help them with a project about procurement. And I wrote an article about it. So long story short, I was a young consultant, 27, 28. I'm in this boardroom with very experienced engineer, and they bring me on because I have somehow this knowledge, this technical knowledge about how you turn a set of, how you make these digital transactions. It's early 2000, e-business is really in infancy. These guys are from another generation, and I happen to somehow have some knowledge about it. 30 minutes in the meeting, I think this is going to go nowhere. They're going to fire me next week if we don't have a radical approach. And so I look at them, not understanding each other. They're bogged down into the features of the product that they're trying to install. They don't even know what they're talking about. And I say, do you mind, guys, if we do this exercise? I pick up a stack of white, sheets of paper. I hand out pencils and pen and say, please turn off your computers. I would like to suggest that everybody draws the project. We post a drawing on the wall. And I was peeing my pants, Kyle. I was so scared. I had no idea what this would do. And I thought my whole career is on the line. And we post those drawings on the wall, and they did the rest. All drawings were different. And they saw by themselves, there's no alignment, there's no focus. We lost why we are doing this, where we're headed. And that's why our project is stuck. And I thought that moment, I reflected on that meeting for years and years after. At the time, I didn't say, we don't have a narrative like the way I do it now. It took me 20 years to understand and model that. But at the time, I thought, okay, if every single project team could just have a way to stay focused on why they collaborate together, things would be more effective. Turns out the budget of this project was $20 million, and we saved it this way. That's my origin story. The opportunity that I see here, sorry.
I want to interrupt though, because this is something I don't understand about the model. So the internal versus external. So that story, that's a compelling, like, why this matters story in a way. I mean, it's rooted in like a particular circumstance, but it's a compelling why. And then also, like, up above on the perspective story, when I think about Volvo, that is what you had listed for Volvo. I don't know if you could pull up the slide again, but
sure,
it was like saying, all cars, this is the way the world should be. Cars should be safe. We should be in a safer world. Like, that sounds like an external sort of point of view thing. Like, I guess I have trouble with so much of this seems like things that should be said externally.
Because I'm externalizing it to you right now. You're getting the outside. I'm communicating it to you, but everything happens inside. That the way I just told it to you I ruminated that story for years and years and years and thought about it with different images and thoughts and feelings in my body. I still remember how I felt in that meeting. I said I almost peed my pants. The need for peeing your pants is internal and individual, Kyle. That's what I mean by the origin story. You're scared, you're excited, you're nervous, you're angry, you want to rebel, you want to revolt. Whatever emotion, good or bad. I'm leaning towards the bad right now, but it could be I'm hopeful. I have a dream. There is another origin story. And this is something
So
that
it's internal to the individual, not internal to the company necessarily.
yes,
Oh,
it's the internal individual quadrant right here. This is such a good question, Kyle, because I agree. And that's why we're mired into, is this communication or behavior? No, it's both. Do you want me to go on?
yeah, sorry.
My opportunity is this. The opportunity is to create more inspiring companies. In the United States, the level of engagement in organization is just abysmal. People are bored. They're tired. They're fed up. They commit suicide. There is internal unemployment. I've been to organizations where you talk to people and you go, what are you working on? I don't know. This is a crime against humanity. We should not treat people like this. But the company is making money, so no one cares. And we look good and we put a facade.
That's a great point about the internal unemployment.
I'm back.
Welcome.
The Comcast connection was not the one to go with.
That's good. So I don't know
Guillaume,
where
Guillaume, like many of us, has two internet connections.
Yeah.
You were starting to get into something that felt like a perspective story, which
Yeah,
is
because
interesting.
it morphs to the perspective, which is my perspective.
Like this is a crime against. Did you say a crime against humanity? Something like that.
Yeah,
was a great line.
I get carried away a little bit. I stretched the picture here, but there is something there. I feel like there is a responsibility to. It ties also to the idea that we have company. You know, there is this movement of creating companies for good, right? To have a positive impact, especially with the environment narrative right now. We want companies to pollute less, to treat animals, people, nature, the planet, our society differently. So that's what I'm talking about here. My perspective on the work that I do is that this is one of the perspective one layer of the perspective that I have. It's the leader's job to build a strategic narrative. There you go. My product story. I mean, I'm not gonna go again, and because I just gave you the pitch, there's a lot of my perspective in the pitch. My product story is that, as of today, the best way I've found to activate this is to create expertise and give it through writing, teaching, and consulting. These are the vehicles that I feel like are most aligned to my perspective, but I have other ideas. They might not be perfect for now. This is a continuum. I feel like these are probably in the early stage of the development of my company, but who knows? There could be a piece of software at some point that aligns with that vision and that perspective. And that's why I'm a member of TI, and that's why I would love to see more people join TI, and that's why I advocate for it. And I think this exercise is so valuable.
I really enjoyed that. Thank you for sharing your own story there. That's great. I mean, narrative.
Yeah.
I gotta
I
stop
want to
switching those words. I like that you told me that
Be
they're different.
careful.
I'm gonna try to change that.
be careful what you say, Kevin. I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's okay to use them interchangeably. The idea is just be more aware of when we do this or not. And
Yeah, I
just
learned that from you. That's excellent.
I want to add one tiny comment here on an origin story. I picked one point in time that was most relevant, but I see it more as a succession of events because there are other big moments and realization in my career. It's not just one thing, but I picked the one that was most relevant to the rest of the system here.
One of the things that's interesting is that, like I know you, Guillaume, a bit through the expertise incubator. I feel like I can, if we were to try to debate or refine one of these stories, it feels more productive because it's more focused. Like I felt myself wanting to say, when you're talking about the last one, I'm like, no, the product is this this framework of 4 stories. And, maybe we would legitimately disagree about that or maybe not, but it just feels like a more productive debate because it's more focused. Like I don't feel like, arguing about the origin story. That's fine. We've moved on. So it's really nice to feel like this enables a more productive discussion. That's another aspect of it that I could see being really valuable. Maybe as you are presenting this to prospective clients, they'll get to experience that. Maybe, you and Kyle were going back and forth earlier about Volvo, and I had a relative experience or a relevant experience that I haven't shared about shopping for a car and looking at Volvo. So these things where people can participate in a debate and get the experience that it's more productive than the stuff they're used to could be really valuable. So maybe sort of baiting people, like trying to get them to argue productively with you about this presentation when you're pitching it could be really interesting. It could help people experience what this is all about.
And the point about productive debate I've heard before from previous clients. I hesitate to because I forget about it. But that's something I've heard after doing asking for feedback after at the end of the project, and to my surprise, for me it was just evident. It's just like, yeah, we should have a productive conversation. But for some clients, it was like, the best part, Guillaume, is that in your meetings, my team ends up with something. There's a packaged product that we get, and it's not just endless hours of chatting and fighting against each other for territories or things like that. We built something together. So I forgot about this. I will bring it back again. Yeah.
Yeah, you may not be able to promise that explicitly in the pitch because most people won't believe it until they experience it, perhaps. But, inviting them to experience it as a part of delivering the pitch that could be interesting. We should probably wrap up in the next few minutes. I'm curious if there's any parting, closing thoughts, things that are on your notes that you just have to say, that kind of thing.
Well, I have a question. Did that make you want to either sign up to the daily list or join the workshop or talk about the workshop to somebody else?
I'm going to join your list for sure. Sorry.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being no, 10 being absolutely, I'll sign up to anything right away. I mean, it's not a scientific scale, but give me a sense of.
For me, that clarified a lot of stuff. And I actually made a note here, Guillaume, which I hadn't planned on sharing, but that one of the things that in the community I run for museums, we talk about storytelling versus narrative comes up, and it's a thematic thing that people have expressed an interest in. And I wrote down, oh, Guillaume could be an interesting guest for our group. Yeah, so this put a lot of pieces together for me, having being on your list and stuff and everything. So yeah, it was very compelling for me.
The consulting I do is usually with a team of other people, and they're like, hey, you have specialized knowledge. Will you come help us not be making mistakes? And so I am going to share that this works or this exists with folks like that, because a lot of times I think they struggle to find alignment. And these kind of conversations are so helpful. I don't do anything nearly as sophisticated as you have developed here. But things that help build alignment like this are really valuable to teams that are trying to build products. And so, yeah, it's a really cool way to approach it. I'm definitely signing up for your list.
Philip, you're so biased.
I know, like I'm like, how many times have I promoted Guillaume's work to my email list?
I know. That's a joke. You don't count.
But
yeah,
in a way. But there is a feeling of like, for me personally, there's this feeling of like, okay, I learned something. There is a kind of like a movement towards action. And I know that's just probably sounds so lukewarm to say it that way, but I think you're accomplishing your intent here. And that's, I guess, what I can say about that question.
So I want to share with you
again.
He'll be back.
He'll be right back. It's some little blip. You're back. You said, I want to share with you, and that's right where it cut off.
I want to share with you why I asked this question. It's because I believe that a pitch ultimately should create some kind of reaction. That's the only way you should measure a pitch. Most people will look at a pitch from, did he check all the boxes? Did he say what the problem, the solution? In the end, we don't care about that. In the end is, did the audience wanted to do something, or did that change their mind, or are they interested in talking to people about it, or signing up, or did that create that feeling of movement, as you said, Philip? And I always remind my own client about this, so I wanted to see if I accomplished that. See if I walk my own talk.
It's no criticism of before, but I was on another one of these pitches that you gave. And at that point, I don't think I got as much traction with the idea, and so I didn't sign up for your list then. But today, I was thinking while you were talking, I need to sign up for his list. And then you put that slide up, and I was like, yes, I'm doing that. So I think you have progressed quite nicely in this.
Thank you. Yeah, the talk that you watched, Kevin, was called Finding Purpose. It was back in January. I was experimenting with this idea of what does purpose has to do with the strategic narrative. I was kind of dabbling and looking. It was not a pitch. There was no call to action. There was more like an experience, and that's why I didn't do that. And what happened after that talk is that I kind of paused on that, and I recognized, okay, there is a connection, but it's not going to be the focal point. So
that makes sense. This
right?
was easy for me to get on board with.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for the constructive feedback. All of your reactions, comments are things I can actually act upon, can do something with it. So I am very thankful for the time and the ideas, and also the care you took in giving me feedback.
Guillaume, thank you. You are taking risks. You are building things. It's impressive to watch. Thank you for doing this today. I think I got as much from it as you did, and I hope that others did too. Thank you all who were here in some form and offered feedback. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to press a button that says end stream, and we will disappear, at least digitally. Thanks all.
Thank you. Take care.